Hi guys. So flowers in the snow. Hello. Flowers in the snow. Um, I'll go through the timings on the chords in another video. In this video, about the technique, you can hear that it's a simple country song, isn't it? It's got that Americana country to it, country and western even of a bass drum style. Now the first chord is a C. You see that? Okay. First chord is a C, and you can either play the 4-finger C and not move any fingers here, because you can hear it says bass strum style with the alternating bass note. Yeah, so you're picking A string, E string, A string, E string. For some reason, I just do the 3-finger C and move that third finger. Now, the little touches that he adds, the difference is rather than just a simple, like Johnny Cash, boom chaka, or 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or pluck down up. And you know I'm doing this. I'll show you it with a pick later. But when I'm doing it with hands, when I'm doing it with finger and thumb, fingernails down, thumbnail up. Yeah. Could go thumb, fingernails down, or just first fingernail down, and then first finger up. Yeah, I'm strumming with the fingerprint part of my first finger up. So that's okay, but you can't get very loud with that, because if you try and dig in and get louder, your finger is very likely to get caught on the strings. So if you're playing just softly, that's fine. But if you want to play louder, yeah, use fingernails down and thumbnail up. And when I say fingernails, these 3 fingers, yeah. Okay, so what he does, he adds a bit of finger picking into this bass drum style. So instead of just boom chaka and going on like that, we've got a bit of now that's quite difficult to put in. I think he's using those things, you know, those, I don't know what they're called actually, those things that you clip onto your fingers, and they're like picks that you can certainly clip it onto your thumb, and you can clip them onto your fingers as well. Yeah, I tried them once or twice. I just didn't get on with them, but I guess if you persist with them, they do make it easier to be accurate and to go between strumming and then single string picking, because it's like you've got a pick on each finger. And playing with a pick, one of the advantages is that it makes it easier to be accurate of plucking a single string and going from a strum to plucking a single string. So anyway, let me show you ways of emulating what he's doing. I couldn't find a video online of him actually playing this live, so I don't know, but I'm assuming he's got some sort of thumb pick and maybe finger picks as well. So if you weren't going to do any adding of single string picking to this, just do this. Just instead of your basic strumming pattern being boom chaka all the time, you can just add in some extra strums. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just that makes a lot of difference, you know, adds variety. And so all I did, I added an up strum. Instead of just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, I went 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, yeah. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. See, I put the 3 and, I put the and of the 3 in. So that's what you do, just to make things a little more interesting, if you weren't going to put in any of the single note picking. If you're going to put in the single note picking, I would suggest starting with this. Let me which is quite difficult. No, what was I doing before? Yeah, basically that. I'm on a C chord. Okay, so I got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it's a 2-bar pattern. I don't want to do it on every bar. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. It's a bit much. But as a 2-bar pattern, it works quite nicely. Or you could just chuck it in wherever you want. You know, you could be doing it just at the end of lyric lines. So when you're actually singing, just do your basic 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And then when you finish the lyric line, you could put in one of these more complex 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, yeah. Now that isn't exactly what he does, but it's very similar to it. And the reason I'm doing that particular pattern is because it's a relatively easy one to do with just finger and thumbs, yeah? Fingers and thumb. Okay, so what I'm doing there is one chaka, so normal bass drum style, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I do my bass note as usual. I've just plucked that low E string. Then with my first finger, so think of it as you're just using your thumb and first finger, yeah? So I've done my usual thumb stroke. Then my first finger, I pluck the B string. Thumb plucks the D string. And then first finger plucks the G string. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and then you're back to just the normal bass drum style. So as soon as you've done this, your next move is your thumb again to start off the normal bass drum style, yeah? Okay, if you were doing it with a pick, okay, I think that's fine with fingers, yeah? So you can add that, and like I said, you don't need to put it everywhere. I mean, this song has C, G, F, those are the main chords, and it's got an A minor in there as well. And you hear it in the intro. That's what I first picked up on, that he's doing some sort of finger picking here. You hear it in the intro before you start singing. And then, yeah, to tell the truth, I can't remember where else you hear it, but generally people will put in the more complex parts not at the same time as the singing, so that things don't get cluttered. So you finish a lyric line, or maybe a whole stanza, and then you'll put one of these in. You might only play this just on the C chord, but I mean, the technique you can take to any chord. If you're on the G chord, yeah, you can put it on that. It's basically where you're going to spend longer on a chord. So if you're only spending a bar or even 2 beats on a chord, you're not going to put it in there, yeah? Okay, I hope that's okay. So now I'll go on to doing the same thing but with a pick. So with a pick, like I said, I think it's easier. I find it easier because I find it easier to be accurate and easier to go between strumming and then picking single strings. So if I do the same thing but with a pick, I'm going... Yeah, so I'm always keeping that motion of down, up, to keep in time. Missed the string there, and it doesn't really matter, you know. You heard that. As long as it's in time, that's the main thing. But it would be nice if I got the accuracy as well. But you know, it's not a way that I usually play, combining those two things, so I'm not used to it. So it does take work. You got to slow it down if you like this, because it can, you know, it can be nice. Yeah? Come back. So, first of all, I just did exactly the same thing as I did with my fingers. I mean, exactly the same sequence. So I went 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and E string, B string, D string, G string. And then something I heard him do, but which is really difficult to do with fingers only, so I didn't show you with fingers, but with a pick you could go, because you're still going down, up. Whereas with fingers you'd have to go thumb, finger, thumb, and then finger, and you'd be crossing thumb and finger over strings, and it gets a bit fiddly. And you wouldn't want to go thumb, finger, finger, because it's pretty difficult to keep the rhythm if you're going from finger to finger. It's much easier to keep the rhythm going from thumb, finger, thumb, finger, thumb, finger, thumb, finger, you know, which is the basis of Travis picking, that you're going thumb, finger, thumb, finger, thumb, finger, thumb, finger. That, much easier to keep rhythm that way. So with a pick, you could do all sorts of patterns, but this one I heard, so that's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, yeah, which is B string, G string, D string. Okay, so I hope that's okay. And like I said, you can use it sparingly and just a little, like in the intro and at the end of vocal lines, or even at the end of stanzas, by which I mean like at the end of a verse or at the end of a chorus, or even you could go, you know, a whole verse and chorus and just put it on the end of that, and then you start your second verse. And it's just that little embellishment that adds interest, so that it isn't just all the way through. Now, just a little note about other things you hear in there. He does that typical bass strum thing of, and we've talked about this before in lessons. So here I am on my C chord going to an F. Now of course you can play the F as full bar, but when I'm going to, this is actually something I heard him doing, when I'm going to the F chord from the C chord, sometimes you hear this little embellishment. So there's your C chord, you're plucking the D string and hammering onto it. So you're plucking an open D string, hammering the second finger back on, because take the second finger off, play the D string, hammer on. So normally, there's a D string. So actually, yeah, because it's going between A string, E string, A string, D string with a hammer on, yeah? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. That beat 4 was an open G string. And that leads you to the next chord, which is an F. And the particular times when he's doing that little embellishment, you hear him pluck the F on the 3rd fret of the D string, yeah, which is why I'm doing this form of F, because I don't need to do all that. And when I want to target that note, I find it easier to do this form of F rather than the whole bar chord. So let me play that again. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. Yeah, then I get to that F and I'm going between the D string, A string. And another run that you hear a lot, bass run as they call it, is from the G to the C. So you hear him go from G, so he's on his G, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So that 3 and 4 is the open A string, and then A string 2nd fret, which is part of the G chord. So you might want to actually, because it's quite difficult to get that A note, that open A string to ring out, if you've still got this finger there, you can get it to ring out, but you've got to make sure you're your hand is more in this position, yeah, so that you've got space under the finger, rather than this, because maybe you can see that when my hand is in this position, the angle of the finger, I'm very likely to mute that A string, whereas if I'm like this, it's okay. Dodgy. Okay, when this finger is on that A string, because it's pushing the A string into the fretboard, this finger isn't muting that, but as soon as this finger comes off, the string raises slightly, and I can now feel it on the underside of that finger. So you might want to get that embellishment or bass run. There, when I'm doing that, I'm taking my second finger off. I've done the G note, 3rd fret, E string. And to make sure that A string rings out, I've taken my second finger off. 1 and 2 and 3 and I didn't do it well then. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and it's leading you into a C, yeah, a C chord. Okay, so that's it for technique. This thing, whether you do it with pick or fingers, I mean, it sounds very Nashville to me. I quite like it. It's got a bit of that slide guitar, Nashville slide guitar feel. I just thought it was a nice technique to have a look at. And if you're doing it with fingers, yeah, and I'm doing that slightly different pattern rather than going B string, D string, G string, because it's just easier to do, and it doesn't make, you know, a huge amount of difference in terms of sound. You're still getting a bass strum style and then some single notes. So I mean, I would need to practice that myself, and I actually find it easier if I'm gonna go from bass strum style with just fingers. I find it easier, I think, or at least I do at the moment, to do my down strum with just a single finger. I'm still doing my up strum with my thumb, and I guess that's because then my single finger is kind of in place rather than using it as part of a whole of fingers 1, 2 and 3, and then having to change that shape, that position, that hand position to this so that I can get those single notes. So if I was strumming like this, thumb, 3 fingers down, yeah, I suppose there's not much in it, but I do find it easier just to be doing that down strum with a single finger. Still coming up with the thumb, but then when I've got my pluck, 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 I've been using these, my little mandible, I've been using my thumb and first finger all the way through, so I've kind of got this hand shape already, and then I apply it to pick those single strings, yeah? And like I said, I mean, I would need work on it, so do take it slow. If you like this addition to your basic bass strumming, and would like it to be part of your technique, as with anything, take it slow, and it will come. It might, you know, feel boring at first to take it really slow, but it's really worth it, because it's basically the only way to get it down, to get it into your muscle memory, with good technique, which means that you're doing it properly, which basically means it sounds okay or it sounds good. Okay, so that's the technique one, and I will do the only other thing really is just how long you spend on each chord, and that's pretty straightforward, so I'll do that in the next video. And as Kate said, there's a chord lyric sheet on Ultimate Guitar. I'll post a link to that, and then yeah, do my version of it as I've done before. Alright guys, oh look, bang on 20. Bye.